Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Journal. In this edition, we wake up to a cold sunrise in the Mojave Desert. And after a cup of hot coffee and a quick breakfast, we head over to the Valley View Ranch to help the National Park Service with the Joshua Tree restoration on the Cima Dome. That'll all be coming up next. Since we'd begun most of the day planting Joshua trees today, we didn't want to leave our equipment unattended on a busy Friday. So after a quick breakfast and cleanup, we stowed our gear and broke camp. Well, good morning. Today is our planting day. Today's Saturday. And today is the day we're going to go over to the ranch and help out the National Park Service plant some Joshua tree. Each one of us, each group of us is going to get about 6 to 10 Joshua Tree seedlings. And we're going to go out and take them to these specific locations that are marked by GPS coordinates. And we have to bury them in a specific way, a specific depth, a specific location near a mother host tree with some partial shade. And we have to mark it with GPS coordinates and cage it off and tag it and upload all these to, I guess, the National Park Service website where they're keeping track of each Joshua tree for future reference. So that'd be exciting today. It's cold here. It's 26 right now, and wind's blowing a little bit, so it seems a lot colder than 26. So I slept pretty good last night. I slept in a Jeep. I had a sleeping bag. I also brought a second lightweight sleeping bag that I draped over the top just to give me some extra warmth, and actually slept pretty good. The wind was blowing pretty good last night. I could hear it rocking the Jeep a little bit, and this morning it's cold. Take your gloves off for like 2 minutes and your fingers start chilling like cold sausages. So I made some Kuju coffee this morning on the Coleman stove. And after I get my coffee, I want to get something for breakfast here. Then we got to pack up camp because we got to be over at the location to meet the National Park Services at 8, and it's already 6:30, so we got to get going here pretty quick. Anyway, that'll be a fun day. Luckily, our meeting location at the Valley View Ranch was only a few miles away, marked by an orange traffic cone beside Cima Road. Gerry and I made the turn onto the highway and drove 2 miles up a dusty gravel and dirt road toward the Valley View Ranch, excited to be able to lend a hand to this special preserve.
Good morning. We are headed to the Valley View Ranch out here in the Mojave National Preserve. Just spent the night camped out by the War Memorial Cross, and we dipped down to 23 last night and hit 27 this morning when we got up. So we are heading on a 2-mile journey here through the burnt out largest Joshua tree forest, at least in California.
All right, here's more cones, whatever that means.
And we're going to meet the National Park Service at the Valley View Ranch.
Like just marking a drop off.
And we're going to help plant some...
big ditch on the right, a little spot you got to be careful with.
We're going to plant some trees today and try to help reforest the 1 million trees or so that were burnt out here in the 2020 fire. It was a real bad fire that year. Since nobody lives out here, they couldn't fight the fire. They had to fight all the other dozens and dozens of fires that were burning in California around home. So this poor Joshua Tree forest had to suffer for it. And so here we are. We're going to try and help plant new Joshua trees, hopefully today, and again tomorrow, and somebody in the future, long after we're history, will come out here and see what we tried to do. So hopefully we're successful.
Well, good morning. Today is Saturday, and we're heading along this access road to try to find the ranch where the National Park Service has set up their way station, the meeting location, so we can get a little bit of education on how to plant a Joshua Tree seedling. And that's where we're going to pick up our bucket of seedlings, 6 or 8 of them, and we're going to get GPS coordinates and get a little bit of instruction on how to plant Joshua trees out here in this burnt forest. That's part of the program here. We're doing a part of a reforestation of the Cima Dome disaster of 2020. In fact, I see the ranch coming up straight ahead here. Okay, well, here's the ranch. Looks like an old wooden structure up here, so it looks like this is where we're going to be going. There's a sign here. Hopefully we'll be able to know where to park and see how many people are here today. We're supposed to meet at 8. Well, it looks like there's a few cars here. 2. It says private residence, so hopefully this is it. Yeah, there's a park guy right there. As we anxiously approached an older residence, we saw park personnel in several vehicles alongside the dirt road. It was now readily apparent just how devastating the Cima Dome fire had been, as several of the structures at the ranch were burned to the ground. There were piles of corrugated roofing tin laying collapsed around wooden structures, and there was even an old bicycle melted into a grotesque shape. A dirt roundabout was next to the residence, where planting supplies were staged ready for use. A small white tank on a trailer provided precious water to not only the national park personnel staying at the ranch, but for us to carry miles over the desert to water the seedlings. Behind a waist-high chain-link fence was a weathered picnic table, a box of Dunkin' Donuts, and Drew Kaiser, our national park botanist. Drew taped a large paper map to the backside of the ranch wall marked with planting locations. When everyone had gathered around, he began our education on the Cima Dome Fire Restoration Project, the biology of Joshua trees, and proper planting techniques. As Drew talked, I took inventory of our volunteers, some of whom would eventually be part of our planting team. I had expected a mix of retired hippies, nature lovers, earthy hikers, and loners, and it didn't surprise me to see a combination of all of those. What I didn't foresee, though, was just how friendly and helpful they all turned out to be. After Drew completed our introduction to the restoration project, the proper planting techniques, and a quick tutorial of the Survey 123 mapping application, we dispersed to our vehicles and pulled into the roundabout to begin loading our supplies and assembling our teams. Piles of wire mesh and rusty rebar laid out in the dirt across from the water tank. Here volunteers filled worn-out 2.5-gallon water bags and placed them into shiny blue 5-gallon buckets with the Mojave Preserve logo on them. Most of the bags had pinhole leaks from repeated use, and volunteers had to be quick to put them inside the buckets to avoid getting wet. Stacks of green-handled sharpshooter shovels and rubber-headed mallets rested on a tarp, waiting to be picked up and hauled out to the planting site. A nearby flatbed trailer was filled with plastic crates of Joshua Tree Seedlings and another odd-looking plant. These were the lucky chosen ones, picked to repopulate the Cima Dome. As we all stood around either filling the water bags or grabbing supplies, or maybe stomping their feet to stay warm, Gerry and I took inventory of the volunteers trying to establish what group we'd fit in. The older group, most likely to travel close to the road to plant, the elite group, which were the fittest and most likely to haul heavier supplies further out in the desert to plant, or the mid-range group, hauling the same supplies but for a shorter distance. It appeared that some of the volunteers knew each other, whether they were friends camping together or just acquaintances from planting on previous days. One older man, an ex-military guy, seemed like he knew what he was doing and he had volunteered before. Drew spoke to him by name and decided that he would be the leader to drive us out to the planting location. All 3 groups, the short-range, the mid-range, and the long-range group, would be starting from the same location, just heading in different directions, like spokes of a wheel. Gerry struck up a conversation with an older gentleman who was also a ham radio operator, and it was mutually decided that he would lead. I, also a ham, would be in the middle of the convoy, and Gerry would be bringing up the rear so nobody got lost. The military guy had overlanding and organizing experience, and it showed. Drew asked who would be doing the most difficult long-range hike and looked for volunteers. Immediately, several people raised their hands. 2 young women, Jessica, a national park botanist, and Diana, a government mapping specialist from the Miwok-Tualamin Indian Reservation near Yosemite. Aaron, he was a repeat volunteer, and Mike, a retired Air Force worker. Now, Gerry shot up his hand as well, so I guess that included me. Looking at those heavy buckets filled with water, I quickly did the math. Okay, water weighs about 8 pounds a gallon, and there's about 5 gallons in that bucket. That's about 40 pounds, plus the weight of the bucket and the frame pack. I lugged a 40-pound bucket of water and set it in the front seat of my Jeep, the remaining cargo capacity already filled with my camping gear. Now, Gerry loaded the wire mesh, the rebar, the mallets, and several packs into the back of his Tahoe. Trying to minimize the number of vehicles traveling in convoy, Jessica rode up front with Gerry's shotgun, and the remaining volunteers divvied up between drivers.
Well, we've got all the plants loaded up in the back of the all the different vehicles. There's about 20 of us here at the National Park Ranch, and we went through a lengthy process on what it takes to plant the Joshua trees, why we're planting them, where we're planting them, how we're planting them, and some of the logistics. It's still cold. My tongue's still frozen. It's still cold out here. Wind's blowing still. There's going to be about 20 of us total planting, and they split us up into about 3 groups, and we're going to be going to different locations. Some are going to be hiking a little farther than others. Me and Gerry picked the farthest location, so we're going to be hiking about 3 miles, I guess, from the vehicle to the location where we're going to be planting. I've got 2.5 gallon containers of water here, so it's really heavy, so I'm not going to be able to carry both of these. I'll carry one of them. Somebody else gets to carry the other one. That's 5 gallons, 40 pounds of water right there in that bucket. So somebody else has the trees, and Gerry's got the cages and the rebar, and hopefully somebody's got the tags. So we're going to be following another guy out. I'm going to be in the middle of the convoy, and Gerry's going to be at the back end because there's 3 ham radios, 3 amateur radio guys in this group. So the guy that's in front has done this before. He knows the location, and he's a ham radio as well. I'll be in the middle, and then Gerry will be bringing up the rear. So in a minute we'll get going, and we'll head out to our site here in the Mojave Preserve to plant some Joshua trees. How about that, huh?
After a quick look around and a brief radio check, the convoy began to move.
Well, we're leaving the National Park Service location, and we're starting our trip along this dirt road, heading out to our planting location to plant the Joshua trees today. There's about 20 of us total, and hopefully we'll get through this road without jarring ourselves too much, and we'll get there in a decent time. We do have quite a bit of hike to do today. We're going to hike about 3 miles carrying the water, so we'll see how long it'll take us. About 45 minutes to get to the planting location, supposedly. Maybe a little longer than that if you include the hike. But should be a good day. It's a good group of people out here, a good group of volunteers. So hopefully in a little while we'll start planting. Well, we've been driving, I'm assuming this is a little bit of southwest maybe. And we're heading right through the heart of the burn zone of the Cima fire. And we've been driving maybe 15-20 minutes now. So it's still kind of chilly outside. It's warm because the sun's coming in my window, but it's only 37 outside. Daytime high will hopefully be in the 50s, I hope. All right, well, we've been driving down this road for about 30 minutes, so hopefully we didn't miss a turn somewhere. Well, this is a little rougher spot here. As we're heading into the middle of the Joshua Tree forest, everything to the left was burnt and everything to the right was green, and then now we're entering this section where they look like they're pretty healthy. Pretty large too. These are some very large, some of the largest Joshua trees I've seen.
The near-perfect symmetry of Cima Dome rises 1,500 feet above the surrounding desert, and at first glance, newcomers to the preserve might not even notice it.
Well, we just did a comm check. Everybody's doing good. I guess there's 1, 2, 3, 4, total of 6 vehicles in this convoy as we're heading through another Joshua Tree forest. Like these Joshua trees look pretty healthy. It is a little sandy through here. I don't have it in 4-wheel drive. I just have it in 2-wheel drive. But I thought, well, if the 2-wheel drive Kia Sorento can make it, then I probably do not need 4-wheel drive here. So I hope nobody has to turn around because there really isn't any locations to do that here. So, but we should be good. Hopefully the road will be coming up here soon.
As we began our hike out across the dome, it became more obvious. When we finally stopped along Aiken Mine Road, Mike, our convoy leader, motioned for us to park just off to the side of the road so others could pass, though highly unlikely. But it made sense, and it was the right thing to do. We began sorting out the supplies, the shovels, the buckets of water, the wire caging, the rebar, and of course, the precious Joshua Tree seedlings. Since everyone seemed familiar with the process, Gerry and I just kind of hung back in the shadows and waited for someone to tell us not only what to do, but what to carry. Our group, the long haul group, consisted of Gerry and I, Jessica, Diana, Aaron, and Mike. The load-carrying Alps Commander hunting packs were carefully loaded with one 40-pound bucket of water, while the other one carried the precious cargo of about 6 Joshua Tree seedlings, wrapped in thick paper and placed carefully upright in another bucket. Others carried the mallets, the rebar, the wire cage, and the hand trowels inside their packs. There really wasn't a good way to secure the buckets without that hard edge digging into your lower back. Luckily, Aaron stepped up to shoulder the heavy load of the water, while Jessica carried the seedlings. Since we were the slowest to organize, the short-range and mid-range planning group started out across the desert toward the Cima Dome along a well-worn desert track. We brought up the rear. After hiking about a half mile or so, we lost sight of the other 2 planting groups, and now we were all alone. We had also come to the burn scar zone. Well, we've been hiking for about 15 minutes or so along this track of healthy Joshua trees, and we've come across the buffer zone of the burn zone. So at some point we'll be veering off to the right, looking for our designated planting location, Sector 57. Aaron, carrying the 40 pounds of water, commented that quite a bit of water was sloshing around inside the bucket due to the pinhole leaks in the bag, and the water was running down his legs. Now, not only was this making him uncomfortable, but he was losing precious water that was allocated for the trees. We stopped to readjust his pack, and Diana volunteered to take the water for the next section. Aaron didn't hesitate to loosen the shoulder straps as we shifted the pack over to Diana's shoulders. Now we were walking due south, away from the dome and deeper into the burn area. Joshua trees, once magnificent and mighty, were reduced to blackened stalks with sand-color spiny stalks that contrasted against blue sky. Off in the distance, Kelso Dune rose above the horizon as the jagged peaks of the granite mountains filled the sky to the south. As we continued hiking across the desert with our heavy loads, Diana began to slow down and the others stretched out their lead. Gerry and I noticed this, and Gerry offered to take the heavy water bucket-filled pack from Diana. She slowed to a stop, and Gerry shouldered the load. How heavy do you think that thing is, Gerry?
Not as bad as a backpacking trip.
So it's less than your normal?
Less than 25.
Yeah. By now, we had been hiking for an hour or so, and Diana glanced at her cell phone, tapping the Survey 123 app. "We're getting pretty close to the planting area," she said. I offered to carry the water, but since we were near the planting zone, Gerry said he'd just carry it to the end. Now, finding the exact location to plant the Joshua Tree seedlings was a science, an exact science. According to Drew, our National Park botanist, this planting was part of a research study on the Joshua Tree refugia. Not only were we required to plant the seedlings in a tight geographic location, we were required to photograph each one facing south to include the mother nurse tree, the cage or no cage, and the tag number. This information was then recorded in the Field app and uploaded to a databank used by researchers at a later date. Navigating to the location was difficult enough using the free-based Survey 123 app. I was never able to get mine to work on my phone. Gerry was able to pull up the map, but not any of the other features. Luckily, Jessica was familiar with the app as she worked for the National Park Service, and Diana was a GIS, or Geographic Information System Specialist, that creates maps, manages and analyzes all types of data. A GIS connects data to a map, integrating location data, where things are, with all types of descriptive information, what things are like there. This provides a foundation for mapping and analysis that is used in science in almost every industry.
GIS turns statistics and numbers into pictures and maps.
Exploring with GIS. Stories about a new age of exploration for the next generation.
Did we luck out in our group? If we were given direct GPS coordinates, it might not have been that difficult to get there, but this software was awkward and cumbersome. Thank God for Jessica and Diana. When we arrived at our precise location, we decided to stop for lunch before planting. We needed a short rest to regroup and resort our combined supplies. We, as a group, were given some leeway as to exactly where each Joshua tree would go within constraints, taking into consideration the location of the potential mother trees, the shade, the water runoff patterns, and locations of live and dead trees. Our first Joshua tree was to be planted within 3 feet of a mother tree, on the north side with a protective cage. This was to prevent rodents and local jackrabbits from eating the tender shoots before they grew. The desert ground was much softer and sandier than I had imagined.
How far down?
Yeah, my skin is just way yesterday.
When the hole was dug to about the correct depth, Gerry grabbed one of the 2.5-gallon water bags and moistened the hole while Jessica carefully removed the first Joshua tree from the bucket and cradled it in her hands like a baby.
Your species is relying on you.
No pressure. You just might go extinct if you don't live. Yeah, so if you want to go ahead and squirt a little bit of water in there. It slides. Yep.
Mike formed the wire into a cage and stood by with the rebar stake while I filmed.
Test it. Drop this in there too.
Get a piece of rebar to use it as a sizer.
Yeah.
Jessica positioned the tree in the hole as Diana backfilled the hole with dirt. When the tree was stable, Jessica slid out the paper wrapping as Gerry gave it its very first waterings. It still looks a little
Just
deep.
a little bit. Yeah, that should be good. The water will pack it too. That looks good. I think, yeah. So go ahead and pour just a little bit in there. More?
We have to plant the
Should be good.
Joshua
Then we
tree
can just-
on the north side of the nurse plant. So it gets a little bit of shade.
Okay, so now what we want to do.
There's quite a bit of water in that soil.
Yeah.
I was surprised it was as soft as it was. I thought it'd be like concrete.
Yeah.
Well, there probably was snow up here in December.
Kind of looks like a pineapple.
Yep.
All right.
Don't tell it that though. It's a lily.
So then, like he was saying earlier, you want to pack that soil in pretty good to get rid of a lot of the air pockets. And then we won't water it again until we get the berm built. We want to put the cage on first.
Mike positioned the wire cage and drove in the rebar stake. Our first tree had been planted. Now, one benefit of using the 123 Survey app was that one of the empty data fields was for the user to input the name of the plant. Drew said he'd noticed that it wasn't required, but volunteers were taking the liberty of assigning names to their prospective plants. This he found humorous. As Gerry poured the final splash of water onto the tree, I told the group about Dave and how he had planned on coming with us but couldn't because of his father's failing condition, and that just days before our trip, Dave's father had passed. I vowed, given the opportunity, I would name a Joshua tree in his honor. In a moment of calm, everybody nodded in agreement, and I named the first Joshua tree Theodore Adolf Ginther, shortened to just Ted Ginther, tag number 1282. I marked the location with my GPS for future return trips into the Mojave Preserve. In a side note, when we returned to the Valley View Ranch, Drew told us that in the very near future, they are starting a new program where you can adopt a Joshua tree. Here you can receive updates on the tree's condition and growth, photos, and more. Now, as a volunteer, especially being the one that planted the tree, we will be giving the first chance at claiming the tree in the program. This was exciting news. Now, Dave can not only adopt the Joshua tree, he can actually adopt the one named after his father for many years to come. After planting the Ted Ginther tree, we still had more trees to go. Since the Ted Ginther tree was near a nurse tree and caged, others were required to be either without a cage or out in the open.
The great thing about our assembled team was that we all worked together, and each one of us was able to not only plant a tree, but name it as well. Gerry picked a location out in the open per the requirements and began digging the hole. Jessica assisted while Gerry carefully lowered the seedling into the hole and began covering it with fresh soil.
So pull that green tag out there. Fill in a little bit, and then I'll have to start opening up the seam. Okay, so be a little deep in this one, but we can pull them up too. Before we pack the soil in, I'll pull it up a little bit.
Not that there's anything not close in this area.
Oh, little buddy.
While this was going on, others were finding appropriate locations for their trees, and they began digging their own holes. Diana dug a hole nearby for her seedling, in the open but caged. I also began planting my seedling with Jessica's assistance. When all the seedlings were planted, burned up, and tagged, Diana began to document the planting using the app. She recorded the tag numbers and names, while Gerry made his rounds with the remaining water to flood the tree wells nourishing the seedlings.
While you're opening it, I know it's really super awkward.
Yeah, it's like sand. Well, this is the Joshua tree that I planted. It is number 894. Number 994. The 994 Joshua tree out here in the middle of the Mojave National Preserve. This Joshua tree right here, its official name, according to the National Park Service records, is Theodore Adolph Gither. That's a tree named in honor of your dad. We have other trees out here planting. We planted one over there that I planted. I don't know, we didn't think we gave that one a name. There's another one over here. We named that one Phoenix, Rise from the Ashes. Hopefully it'll grow from this burned area. Planted a total of 6. There was another one named Firefly, one of the girls named. Another girl named Her Tree, the Three Stooges. And I don't know what the other ones are named, but that's what we came up with. So we're about done planting here in the middle of the Mojave Preserve, and we're going to start heading back. When all was accomplished, we began our trek back to our vehicles, this time unencumbered by the weight of the heavy water bags in the seedlings. The hike back went quick as we skirted the edge of the burn zone and made the turn onto a dirt track. When we reached our vehicles, we had discovered that we were the last group to return. Well, we made it out to plant the Joshua trees. We hiked about 3 miles out, found area 57 or zone 57. And we planted 6 Joshua trees in various different ways. Some of them were planted with a cage, some without a cage, some next to a mother plant, some not next to a mother plant. And we tagged them all. They recorded them all in their documentation. And hiked 3 miles back. Took a break at the vehicles. We were waiting. We were the long group. We hiked 3 miles out. That's the furthest they planted them from this location. So we hiked 3 miles out. The mid-range group hiked about 1.5 miles, 2 miles out. And there was another group that hiked a little shorter distance than that. And there was another group that didn't hike at all. They had, low clearance vehicles, and they just took some watering buckets and just watered the plants that were already planted. But it was a good day. The group of people we had was really nice. It was Jessica and Diana, Aaron and Mike, and then me and Gerry. And we all worked very well as a team. We all took turns doing different things. I dug a couple of holes. I planted one of the Joshua trees. I built a couple of berms. And Gerry did a lot of the watering. He got to plant a tree as well. We all got to name them. I was fortunate enough. The first tree that was planted, I named in honor of Dave's dad, who passed away. So it was Theodore Adolph
Ginther was planted, and the location was recorded. And I also took reference markers with my GPS, so I can send those to Dave. He can look them up on Google Earth, and if he wants to, he can even adopt a plant. They said in the future they're going to have an Adopt the Joshua Tree program where they'll give you coordinates for a Joshua tree, and they'll go out there every year and visit the Joshua tree and take recordings of how it's growing and post pictures online. So it'd be kind of cool. You know, maybe I can adopt the Joshua tree. And so that's kind of cool. So anyway, so now we're heading back down this power line road. And it's going to take us a while, probably 45 minutes, maybe even an hour to get back to the ranch, the National Park Ranch. And then we'll head back over to our spot over in the Mojave Cross. Hopefully it's still there. It is a Friday night, so, you know, maybe somebody took our spot, maybe they didn't, I don't know, we'll find out. If not, we can remote camp pretty much anywhere. We're self-sufficient here, so it's not a big deal. But anyway, it was a good day, and we'll see if we're going to do this tomorrow. I have a feeling we might. But I tell you what, an ice cold beer and get that fire going. It's a little chillier than you think. It looks nice and clear and sunny and warm, but it's not as hot as you think. I took off my jacket when I got back to the Jeep in 5 minutes. It only lasted 5 minutes. The jacket came back on. So this time of year, it's actually a little colder than you would think out here in the Mojave Preserve. Well, anyway, so that's going to do it for today. We're going to head back to the camp and try to find our location, get set up in our camp again today, and start cooking some dinner. I'm ready for it.
The drive back along the dusty Aiken Mine Road to French Valley Ranch went smoothly until my check engine light illuminated about halfway back. This wasn't the normal time to change the oil light, but a sign of a much more difficult potential problem. Being out here in the middle of nowhere, this far from services, this was not a place to break down. I double-checked all the gauges and listened to the Jeep carefully. All sounded pretty good. I chalked it up to a dirty air filter, and from driving through the sand and following too closely to the vehicles in the convoy in front of me. The Jeep made it back to the Valley View Ranch without any further issues, even though the light was still troublesome.
Well, I'm a little nervous. My check engine light came on as I'm driving along this section of road here, so I don't know why the check engine light came on. The temperature gauge is fine, and there's no other lights indicated. There's no oil light on or anything, so I don't really know. Could just be the dust, and maybe the vibrations activated the sensor, I don't know. Hopefully, when we stop here at the National Park little ranch here, I'll let the engine turn off. I'll turn it back on again and see if it reboots and resets. Hopefully that's it. I don't know. There's nothing else wrong with the engine that I can tell. It seems to be running fine. So this is a rough road a little bit, and it's dusty, so maybe it's just dust. I'm hoping. If not, I'm a long, long way from home.
When we arrived back at the ranch, Drew was waiting for us. He shook our hands individually and thanked us for our participation. He asked us if we were coming back tomorrow to plan again. We all said yes. Diana leaned over and said since she was camping alone and didn't really want to get involved with the whole party atmosphere here at the ranch, she asked if she could hang out with us tonight. We told her there was plenty of room over here at the Mojave Cross and it'd be a quiet night. She agreed and followed us out of the ranch and back to the Mojave Cross campsite. When we arrived back at our previous location, we discovered it had already been taken, so we had to hunt for a new place. Luckily, Diana had parked right next to the Mojave Cross, where there was not only a nice spot to camp, but it already had a great campfire ring and a picnic table. Since it was getting pretty late, we decided to camp there. We took advantage of the beautiful setting sun to climb around the Mojave Cross and watch the sunset and took some amazing photos. The wind blew chilly here now that it was getting close to dark, but we were plenty warm wearing our down jackets, beanies, and gloves. I took advantage of the campfire to make some grilled cheese and tomato sandwiches on my Joffle iron, while Gerry opted for some Mountain House tonight. Diana said she wanted to retire to her tent to read. Gerry and I sat by the campfire, reliving old adventures and trying to get some night shots with our phones. We had a long day tomorrow, as we had volunteered to be the long-range group again, and this time we were going to be hauling water out to a different remote location to water trees that were planted back in December. I crawled back into my Jeep and snuggled into my sleeping bag, and I slept sound tonight. In the next edition of the journal, Diana, Jessica, Gerry, and I head back out to locate, inspect, and water Joshua trees on a remote shoulder of the Cima Dome out here in the National Preserve.
Oh, If you have any questions or comments about this or any other edition of the journal, drop me a note in the comment section below. And of course, be sure to click and subscribe and tap that notification bell to get the latest updates on our adventures. Take care, and we'll see you down the trail in another edition of the journal, Joshua Tree Restoration. That'll be coming up next. Take care. Bye-bye. Good drink there, little buddy.